Hey viewers, welcome back to the channel. In a world where truth is often buried under propaganda, one young African leader is shaking the very foundation of Western dominance. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the fearless, unapologetic 36-year-old president of Burkina Faso, is becoming the name the world cannot ignore. After kicking out colonial powers and reclaiming his nation gold mines, Traoré has survived 16 assassination attempts and counting. Now he's facing an even bigger battle, a global media smear campaign led by those terrified of a free sovereign African. When offered 200 mosques by Saudi loyalties, Traoré made it clear, "My people need hospitals, schools and jobs, not monuments." A leader who chooses the welfare of his people over political vanity. No wonder the West fears him. Today, the world watches as Burkina Faso's lion stands against the storm, and the people, not just in Africa but across the globe, are rallying behind him. Is this the beginning of a true African resiliency? Stay tuned as we dive deep into the story that mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the leader the West wants to silence, but history is bound to remember.
Survived 16 assassination attempts. No wonder they want him dead. In a private exchange between nations, Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia offered Ibrahim Traoré, the young, bold, charismatic leader of Burkina Faso, 200 new mosques, an enormous gesture. But Ibrahim Traoré, the youngest leader in Africa and a devout Muslim, didn't respond with excitement. He responded with clarity. He said, "My people can pray anywhere. If the people of Gaza can still pray under bomb, my people don't need 200 mosques. What they need are hospitals, school, job. They need to survive." Who do you hear speak like that in today's economy? Traoré has survived 16 assassination attempts in the last 2 years. France and the United States fear him. They want to Gaddafi him, Saddam Hussein him, Cuba him, Venezuela him. Not because he's violent, but because he's free. All he wants is his country and Africa to be led by Africans. Ibrahim Traoré, what do you think?
We're all very clear on why they're going after Ibrahim Traoré and Burkina Faso. It's because Ibrahim Traoré is going to give Africans free education. And because Ibrahim Traoré is doing the right thing by his citizens and making sure that people there have a home. Ibrahim is looking out for the people of Burkina Faso, not himself. He is becoming extremely popular amongst the youth across the African diaspora. So it is no surprise to me that they are now trying to take this man out, because your accusations are definitely not working. And even the president of South Africa has stated they reject your allegations against Captain Ibrahim Traoré. The bottom line is the French and America are being pushed out of these people's resources, which is only fair. The audacity of the West to think that they should have some rights to anything this president has in his country is crazy. Because if anyone were to come to America and stake claim over our resources, we would lose our shit.
You're going to be hearing the name Captain Ibrahim Traoré a lot on your timeline over the next few days, as he is the first, yet the youngest, world African leader that is being targeted to be unalived by the West. Now, you might have heard of Captain Traoré before, as he is known to have kicked out and overthrown the French in Burkina Faso back in around 2022. You see, the US military chief for African operations actually briefed the US Senate, accusing Ibrahim, saying that he is hoarding all of the wealth, all of the valuable resources within Burkina, and that is becoming a problem. Further accusing Ibrahim of hoarding these valuable resources for himself at the direct expense of the people of Burkina Faso. However, with anyone with more than 3 brain cells, we can understand that this is a common lie that the West likes to tell. We know that this is not what's actually happening. What is happening is that he is actually protecting those resources from being further exploited and further taken advantage of by the US and other Western actors. Surprisingly, when someone from their homeland wants to protect their resources and not just frivolously give give it out, they're demonized as this terrorist that's in some drastic need of humanitarian intervention. Unlike many other African leaders, is actively choosing to fight against Western colonialism. This guy has taken back gold mines from the West, has actively survived over 20 assassination attempts. It's very clear to me and anyone with eyes that the West are unbelievably terrified of a united Africa and any other African leaders that want to follow suit. You're going to be hearing the name Captain.
This dude is the man. This dude is the man. This dude is the man. In the same week, this man, Ibrahim Traoré, said no to Trumpy, Saudi Arabia, and Air France. In the same week, Trumpy invited Captain Ibrahim Traoré to come to the US and have a meeting with him. He said no. Not only that, he said no. He said, and I quote, no, I'm busy building my country. Elite. And Trump got mad. He said that was disrespectful and he was going to put sanctions on Burkina Faso. Yo, this dude is the man. This dude is the man. Saudi Arabia approached him. They wanted to build 200 mosques in Burkina Faso. He said, and I quote, he said, no. Our people can pray anywhere. If the people in Gaza can still pray while they're getting bombed, our people in Burkina Faso can also pray. We don't need mosques. He said, we do not need mosques. We need schools, we need hospitals, we need companies, we need businesses, we need industries, but we do not need mosques. Elite. This dude is the man. This dude is the man. A few weeks ago, maybe a month, Air France said that they would not send the planes in Burkina Faso because Burkina Faso was a red zone, right? And Captain Ibrahim Traoré said, okay, if you're not going to send your planes here, that's fine. All these other companies are sending their planes here. And you are saying that our country is a red zone. No problem. Fast forward, this week, Air France got in contact with Ibrahim Traoré. And this time they're like, we would like to send our planes in Burkina Faso moving forward. And he said, and I quote again, before you start sending your planes over here, make sure that you tell the rest of the world that Burkina Faso is not a red zone. Tell them that Burkina Faso is a green zone before you can start sending your planes over here, because you were the ones putting that in the press that we were a red zone. No problem. You want to send your planes over here? Cool. But you got to make sure that you tell the rest of the world that Burkina Faso is a green zone from now on. Elite. This dude is the man. Meanwhile, the president of Congo is over here begging Donald Trump for help. I'm so embarrassed.
So do you know about this? Have you heard of President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso? All right, young man, been in power 2 years now, president of Burkina Faso. He's a military guy, captain. And I don't know if you know about this, but there's been about 18 assassination attempts on his life. And he came into power at a very strategic time in the history of Burkina Faso, a lot of difficulty, instability. And he's done quite a few amazing things in his 2 years, even though they've tried to assassinate him so many times. If you go and look what he is trying to do in terms of key reforms aimed at stabilizing his nation, he has built schools, hospitals, roads, developed agriculture, donating a lot of tractors and equipment for agricultural development so they can produce their own food. They have stopped exporting raw materials. They are trying to process gold themselves, hospitals, all those kind of things. You know, there's a lot of things, even airport, all right? And so there's a lot of development that's going into Burkina Faso at this moment in time. And I'm sitting and I'm looking at this whole thing. Now, I'm not saying I agree with everything he is doing, all right? I'm also not saying that everything he's doing is bad. I think any president that is building schools, working on education, all right? Any president that is bettering the health care of their people, that's trying to help their people to become more self-sustainable, less reliant on imports, etc., increased production in the country, factories, job creation, etc. I think that is a praiseworthy president. And so the interesting thing is, when it comes to Africa, and you go and look at the history of the last 20 years of Africa, and presidents that have been removed either through a military coup and or assassinated and or removed weird circumstances or committed suicide, you know. A lot of those, or let me rephrase that, some of them were corrupt, all right? All of them were not good. But there were a number of them whose heart was really to better their country. But they have something in common, and that is that they went against the global establishment, if I can put it like that. And I'm not going to define that, go into details, all right? I think you know what I'm talking about. And so a lot of them just suddenly left this earth in sometimes a very bizarre way. So I'm looking at President Ibrahim Traoré, and I'm not saying, again, I'm agreeing with everything he's doing, especially with some of his alliances, some of the other leaders in Africa that he's endorsing. Some of them are questionable, all right? But it is very clear that he's got a heart for his people and for his nation. And in his aim to develop his own country, there's been roughly 18 assassination attempts on his life. And if you look at the trend of African leaders disappearing when they want to build their own countries and invest in their people, isn't that a bit strange to you? Isn't that bizarre, you know? Now, I know what's going on. I'm not talking from a position of ignorance, all right? The thing is just I can't discuss a lot of these things on this platform, all right, because of the fact that the video will be removed. Free speech is not always as free as you think. You know, there's a price to pay. In any case, so I'm looking at this whole situation with interest and seeing where this is going. But I'll tell you one thing. If I look at what has happened the last 2 years with Captain Ibrahim Traoré, I would say if I was him, I would sleep with one eye open. And it's very hard to know who you trust in circumstances like that. And that is true for any leader, any government official, any president. Sometimes you don't know who are friends and who are your enemies. And but let's keep our eye on this. Very interesting developments, and a lot is changing in Burkina Faso at this moment in time. So do you know about
It was formerly colonized by France and has an abundance of gold in natural resources. Traoré pushed out Western influence, including the mine owners, who are French mine owners in Burkina Faso. France wanted to reestablish relations with Burkina Faso, and if you've seen Macron giving a pretty ridiculous speech trying to say one day they'll thank us for helping them, no, they just wanted you to leave them alone. Anyway, Traoré said that in order to reestablish relations with France, that France is going to have to return all of the gold that they have stolen from Burkina Faso's mines, and all of this gold that they have is sitting in reserves in France. France is trying to say that that gold is theirs. It comes from mines in France. There are no gold mines in France. So now the US is getting involved. And we can all guess what those claims are going to be. Now we're seeing the claim, oh, he's stealing all the gold for himself and he's not helping his people. The next they're going to be like, we need to bring democracy to Burkina Faso, like those typical things that the US says in order to manufacture consent for invasion and ultimately backing a coup, which I'm sure they have already tried. Them, France, and anybody else who benefits from the gold exploitation of African nations, which includes those fake Muslim countries like the UAE. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for saying that. But there's a reason why a lot of these nations are not coming to to the aid of Palestinians and are also thriving off of the exploitation of natural resources from nations in Africa. Anyway, I'm hoping this gets picked up by American TikTok, but we'll see. And as we go along, you're probably going to hear a lot of comparisons of Thomas Sankara to Ibrahim Traoré. Sankara was a leader almost exactly like Traoré. Around 1970s in Burkina Faso, I have one of his speeches pinned on my profile. I'm going to make a part 2 sharing what I know about Sankara because I understand this is 2 minutes and that might...
So Captain Ibrahim Traoré represents a powerful shift in Americans' political consciousness, one that Western powers are desperately trying to suppress. When Traoré rose to power in Burkina Faso in 2022, many viewed him simply as another transitional leader. What few realized at the time was that Traoré wasn't stepping into the power to be a placeholder. He came with a mission to return Burkina Faso's wealth to its people, to reclaim sovereignty and to spark a movement that could very well change the fate of America itself. From the very start, he took divisive action. One of his first moves was to kick out French military forces, ending years of so-called counter-terrorism operations that in reality were little more than colonial resource extraction efforts under the guise of security. The French military bases, intelligence operations and economic clans have been deep with Burkina Faso for decades. Traoré made it clear Burkina Faso would no longer be a playground for Western interests and that boldness earned him immediate ruthless enemies. Fast forward to today, and what do we see? A massive Western media machine churching out narrative against him. US military chiefs accusing him of holding Burkina Faso resources. Think about that for a second. The very institutions that have plundered the African continent for centuries are now accusing a young African leader barely in his mid-30s of being the problem. Is a playbook we have seen too many times. Dehumanize, isolate, destabilize, and if that doesn't work, eliminate. But what Traoré is doing is clear to anyone paying attention. He's protecting his country's goods, its mines, its natural wealth from exploitation. He's building a framework where Burkina Faso resources benefit Burkina Faso first, not multinational corporation, not foreign governments, not bankers sitting in glass towers thousands of miles away, and because of that, he's become a prime target. 16 assassination attempts in just 2 years. 16. Most world leaders don't survive 2. That number alone should tell you how terrified the global establishment is of what Traoré represents. He's not just another African president. He's a symbol of resistance, a symbol of independence, a symbol of what Africa could be if it wasn't constantly under siege by external forces. And it's not just about Burkina Faso. Traoré historic, his action, his survival, all of it is sending a message across the continent. Mali, Niger, Guinea, nations are watching, and some are following. Military juntas and new governments are beginning to challenge French colonial influence. Leaders are starting to talk about forming alliances outside traditional Western structures. They are opening dialogue with Russia, China, the Middle East, even each other. They are reconsidering the CFA France currency system, a relic of French imperialism that still shackles 14 African nations to Paris economically. This tariffs the West, because a united independent Africa is not a resource colonial, is a competitor, is a threat to the current global order where Africa is seen as a supply depot, not a sovereign continent. When Saudi Arabia Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman offered Traoré 200 moxes as gesture of friendship, Traoré didn't fall for the political bath. His answer was simple, human and unforgettable. My people can pray anywhere. What they need are hospitals, schools, and jobs. This response struck a chord not just in Burkina Faso but worldwide. Here was a leader patronizing substances over symbolism, survival over spectacular. He wasn't interested in political theater. He was focused on nation building, on giving his people their infrastructure, the education, the economic opportunities to strive. How many world leaders today have the courage, the integrity to say that, to reject vanity projection in favor of true national development? Very few. Most are entangled in corruption, blinded by wealth, or puppeted by external powers. Traoré authenticity is a breath of fresh air and is dangerous to those who profit from a weak Africa. Let's be clear, the narrative being pushed by the US and France that Traoré is holding wealth and hurting his people is propaganda, pure and simple. It's the same playbook used to against Patrice Lumumba in Congo, against Thomas Sankara, another Burkinabe hero, against Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, against anyone who dares to dream of an Africa for Africans. In each case, the West justify intervention by painting these leaders as corrupt, dangerous, or mad. They destabilize their government, sow chaos, and install regime that would continue the cycle of dependency and exploitation. It's a story older than most of the countries we live in today. And if history is any guide, theory must tread carefully. He's operating in an incredibly dangerous space. Economic warfare, political subterfuge, media attacks, and even outright assassination are tools the Western powers have never hesitated to use. But the difference today is that more people are awake. The internet, city journalism, and a growing pan-African consciousness mean that attempts to demonize and destroy leaders like Theory won't go uncontested. Millions are watching, millions are organizing, and millions are ready to fight back with information, solidarity, and action. Truly, leadership isn't perfect. No human leader is. But in a world starved of authenticity, his commitment to his people's welfare over foreign approval is revolutionary. He's setting a blueprint that others can follow. Reclaim your resources, patronize your people, resist external manipulation, and build your own future. If Ibrahim Traoré survives, and I hope he does, his impact could echo across the next century of African history. And that is exactly why he's being targeted now. Because if one leader can inspire a continent, the entire global balance of power could shift. In closing, it's crucial to reject the seamless narrative being pushed by Western media. It's crucial to look deeper, to ask who benefits when African leaders are topped and African nations are destabilized. It's crucial to listen to the people on the ground, not to polish the pulpits in Washington, Paris, or London. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is fighting not just for Burkina Faso, he's fighting for a vision of Africa that has been crushed again and again but refuses to die. A vision of an Africa that stands on its own 2 feet, owns its destiny, and demands respect on the global stage. The next time you hear his name dragged through the mud by corporate media outlets, remember what is really at stake. It's not just one man's reputation, it's the future of an entire continent. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more real-world political commentary, and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Stay tuned, stay sharp, and stay awakened. Until next time, peace.